Many homes in Japan don't look like places for living. Some look like experiments. Steel boxes stacked in the air, sealed tight with a single round window, corridors dim and narrow, the air still and heavy. It feels more like a capsule in a machine than a home. But this isn't just about the looks, it's about what these buildings make you feel. Let's talk about how the Nakagin Capsule Tower shaped the minds of the people inside it, and why some called it the future, while others couldn't wait to escape. When you walk into a room, you might not notice every detail, but your mind does. The size of the space, the way the walls meet the ceiling, the direction of the light, even the smell of the air, all start working on you. Some of that influence is quiet and slow. You feel comfortable in one place, restless in another. You may not know why. Architecture is not just the backdrop of life. It shapes the way we think, move, and behave. Think about a small waiting room in a doctor's office. The chairs are set in a tight circle. The ceiling is low. The only window looks out at a blank brick wall. You start tapping your foot. You check the clock twice in a minute. The space is doing this to you. It is controlling the amount of light you get, limiting your view, and giving you no space to move. These choices change how you feel. The walls are not talking, but they are sending messages. Now imagine the opposite, a large room with high ceilings, sunlight pouring in from several tall windows, and a view that stretches to the horizon. You stand taller. Your breathing slows. This is not magic. It is the human mind responding to space the way it has for thousands of years. We evolved outside, in open environments. When a building closes us in, we feel it. When it opens up, we feel that too. Sometimes design goes against what the body expects. This creates what psychologists call spatial dissonance. It is when the shape, scale, or flow of a space does not match the way we think it should be. Your brain has a mental map for how a corridor should work. If a hallway twists and turns for no reason, or if it narrows until you have to turn sideways to pass, your brain starts sending alert signals. It is not danger exactly, but it feels wrong. One way to understand spatial dissonance is to picture a door that looks like it should push open, but actually pulls. You hesitate, your hand pauses, you feel a moment of confusion. Now imagine that confusion spread across an entire building. Rooms lead into each other without logic. Stairs end at blank walls. Windows look out at concrete instead of sky. This mismatch between expectation and reality can unsettle you in small ways at first, but over time, it can wear you down. History gives us many examples of buildings that change the way people think and act. One of the most famous is the Panopticon, a prison design proposed in the late 1700s by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham. It was a round building with cells arranged along the outer wall and a watchtower in the center. The watchtower had blinds, so prisoners could never know if they were being watched. They had to act as if they were under constant observation. In the Panopticon, the architecture itself became the guard. The prisoner's view was always inward toward the watchtower, never out into the world. The layout removed privacy, choice, and any control over their surroundings. Even without a guard in the tower, the design worked on their minds. Prisoners adjusted their behavior, became cautious, and even policed themselves. This was not the result of direct orders or physical force, but of the space they lived in. The Panopticon shows how the shape and arrangement of a building can affect mental states over long periods. A cell that faces another cell and nothing else can cause isolation. A corridor where every step echoes can amplify stress. High walls that cut off the horizon can create a feeling of being trapped. None of these effects require the building to be dirty, noisy, or falling apart. The structure alone can cause them. We see smaller versions of this in everyday places. Office cubicles, for example, were meant to give workers privacy, but the low partitions often do the opposite. You can hear conversations on both sides. You feel observed without seeing who is looking. Many find it hard to focus in such spaces. School classrooms with no windows can make students restless. Long hospital corridors with no landmarks can disorient patients. Spatial dissonance is not always bad. Sometimes it is used on purpose to create surprise or excitement. A theme park may use narrow, dark tunnels to make the space seem more thrilling when you step into a bright, open area. A museum may arrange rooms in unexpected ways to slow visitors down and encourage them to notice details. But when dissonance is unplanned or constant, it can cause stress, confusion, or even fear. The human brain is wired to scan for threats and to orient itself in space. When a building works against these instincts, it can feel as if you are always on guard. You may start to avoid certain hallways, pick the seat with the best view of the exits, or find reasons not to spend much time there. In extreme cases, you might feel trapped or anxious even when nothing obvious is wrong. Understanding this power is key to understanding buildings like the Nakagin Capsule Tower in Tokyo. It was built to be efficient and futuristic, yet its size, shape, and repetition create strong and sometimes uncomfortable reactions in the people who live or stay there. Before we even step inside Nakagin, we can already see the same forces at work that made the panopticon a legend in prison design. The building itself is an active player in the mental lives of its occupants. After the Second World War, Japan rebuilt its cities, industries, and national confidence at a pace few countries had ever seen. The 1950s and 1960s were decades of rapid economic growth. Factories expanded, export markets opened, and wages rose. By the early 1970s, Tokyo was a city of constant movement. Streets filled with buses, taxis, and the surge of commuters moving between crowded suburban homes and corporate headquarters in the city center. The figure at the heart of this daily cycle was the salaryman. The salaryman was more than a worker. He was an icon of post-war Japan. Wearing a dark suit and tie, carrying a briefcase, he often left home before sunrise and returned late at night. His loyalty to his company was matched by his endurance in long work hours, business dinners, and late-night drinking with colleagues. For many, the commute added another 2 to 3 hours to an already full day. Tokyo's central business districts were the engines of the country's growth, but they were surrounded by residential neighborhoods that could not keep up with the demand for housing. This intense pace of life created a problem. Many executives, traders, and middle managers needed a place to sleep in the city, close to work, without giving up their family homes in the suburbs. The cost of a second apartment in central Tokyo was high, and hotel stays were expensive over time. The city's narrow streets and dense blocks left little room for new, spacious housing. Architects began to imagine different ways to make room for people in the middle of the city. It was in this environment that the Metabolist movement took shape. A group of young Japanese architects, including Kisho Kurokawa, Kiyonori Kikutake, and Fumihiko Maki, began to talk about cities as if they were living organisms. They argued that buildings should grow, adapt, and change over time, just as living things do. Instead of building solid, fixed structures meant to last unchanged for a century, they proposed megastructures with parts that could be replaced or expanded as needs shifted. The name metabolism came from the biological process by which living things take in new materials and expel waste. In the same way, metabolist buildings would take in new modules and discard outdated ones. These architects believed Japan's cities should be able to respond to economic, social, and technological changes without having to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch. They saw this as a practical solution for a nation growing as quickly as Japan, but also as a philosophy for a more flexible and responsive kind of urban life. Kurokawa, the youngest of the group, pushed the idea further. He believed that people in the modern world would live more mobile lives. Work, travel, and technology would pull them from place to place, and homes would need to follow that pattern. This was not a future of one house for life, but of interchangeable living units that could be swapped, upgraded, or moved as easily as a car. He called this vision homo-movens, or the moving human. For the homo-movens, the city was not a static map of fixed homes and offices. It was a fluid network of spaces you could enter and leave without losing your place. If you changed jobs, you could change your capsule. If a capsule became outdated, it could be removed and replaced without affecting the rest of the building. This idea was not about luxury. It was about efficiency and adaptation. Kurokawa's plan fit perfectly with the needs of the 1970s Tokyo salaryman. Imagine a trader working long hours near Ginza. His main home is in Chiba, a train ride of 90 minutes each way. With a capsule in the city, he could work late, sleep in a private space of his own, and walk to the office in the morning. On weekends, he could return to his family. The capsule would have everything he needed for the night: a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, and basic appliances. Meals could be eaten in the cafes and izakayas nearby. This thinking led to the Nakagin Capsule Tower. The building was a clear statement of Metabolist principles. It had two concrete towers for the stairs, elevators, and utilities. Onto these cores, small steel capsules were bolted, each one a complete living or working space. In theory, any capsule could be unbolted and replaced with a new one. The building could keep its structure while updating its parts, just as a body replaces its cells over time. The capsules were prefabricated in a factory, fitted with appliances, and shipped to the site on trucks. This method saved time and allowed for mass production. It also made the capsules interchangeable. In Kurokawa's view, you could even imagine taking your capsule to a different building in another city, plugging it into a new core, and continuing life there. This was a radical shift from the idea of a fixed home address. In practice, the building became a mix of residential and office spaces. Some companies bought several capsules for employees who needed to stay overnight in Tokyo. Others were sold to individuals who wanted a second home in the city. The building reflected the optimism of the time. Japan's economy seemed unstoppable, and the idea of living in a compact, efficient pod fit with the country's interest in technology and modern design. The exterior of the Nakagin Capsule Tower looked like a stack of futuristic modules, each with a round window. It was unlike anything else in Tokyo at the time. Tourists and architects from around the world came to see it. The design seemed to answer a specific question: how can we house people in the city without expanding its footprint? For the Metabolists, it was a glimpse of how cities could grow without destroying themselves. The homo-movens idea also reflected a shift in how people thought about identity and home. If you could move your living space as easily as changing offices, then your sense of home might become more about the contents of the capsule than the location. For a salaryman, it meant a way to live both in the city and in the suburbs. For Kurokawa, it meant a way to break free from the limits of traditional urban planning. The Nakagin Capsule Tower stood in Tokyo's Ginza district like no other building around it. Two tall concrete towers rose side by side, joined by narrow bridges on certain floors. Around these towers, small steel boxes jutted out in every direction. Each box was a capsule, and together they gave the building the look of a giant stack of industrial parts bolted to a central frame. There were 140 capsules in total. The concrete towers were the backbone of the structure. They held the stairs, the elevators, and all the main utility systems like water, electricity, and sewage. By putting these services in the cores, Kisho Kurokawa freed the capsules from having to carry those systems themselves. This meant a capsule could be removed or replaced without disturbing the others. The design made the towers permanent while allowing the outer modules to change. In theory, the building could be kept alive indefinitely by swapping out old capsules for new ones. Each capsule was small, only about 10 square meters in floor area. Inside, the space was 2.5 meters wide and 4 meters long. The most striking feature was the large circular window at one end. It measured 1.3 meters across and acted as the capsule's only view of the outside world. From the street, the repetition of these round windows created a pattern across the building's face. From inside, it framed a fixed scene, much like looking out of a ship's porthole or a camera lens. The layout inside the capsule was compact and efficient. One side was fitted with built-in cabinets, shelves, and appliances. A fold-out desk could be pulled down for work. The appliances included a small television, a radio, and, in the early years, even a reel-to-reel tape deck. Below the counter space, a mini refrigerator kept food and drinks cold. The bathroom was tucked into the opposite corner. It was about the size of an aircraft lavatory, with a small toilet, sink, and a tiny tub with a handheld shower. There was just enough room for one person to turn around. The bed took up much of the floor space. There was no separate bedroom or living area. The same spot served for sleeping, sitting, and moving about. Storage was limited to the built-in cabinets and a few small shelves. The design forced the occupant to be selective about what to keep inside. In many ways, it resembled a first-class train compartment or a cabin on a cruise ship. Every centimeter, had a purpose. The way the capsules were made was as much a part of the vision as their size and layout. They were prefabricated in a factory in Osaka. Workers built each one as a complete unit, installing the walls, floors, ceilings, wiring, plumbing, and all the interior fittings before it ever reached Tokyo. The capsules were made from lightweight steel truss frames covered with ribbed steel panels. These panels were coated with rust-preventive paint and finished with a glossy spray coating. The inside walls were clad in materials that could be cleaned easily, but were also inexpensive to produce. Once finished, the capsules were loaded onto trucks and driven to the construction site. Because the towers were already in place, installation was quick. Each capsule was lifted by crane and bolted directly to the tower using 4 high-tension bolts. This process meant that 5 to 8 capsules could be installed in a single day. The whole attachment phase took about a month to complete. The bolt-on system was central to Kurokawa's idea. By detaching the bolts, a capsule could be removed without affecting the others. A new one could be brought in, lifted into place, and secured to the same fittings. This made the capsules replaceable in the same way that a part of a machine can be replaced without replacing the whole machine. In practice, it was a radical idea for a residential building. Most apartment towers are static. Once built, the units inside stay the same until the whole structure is renovated or demolished. From the street, the design sent a strong visual message. The capsules projected out from the towers, giving each unit a sense of independence. They did not look like they were stacked inside an outer wall. They looked like they had been plugged into the building. This visual separation reinforced the idea that they were temporary parts of a larger organism. The building looked like it could grow or shrink as needed, adding or removing capsules over time. Inside, the experience was different. The porthole window admitted light, but it also created a sense of enclosure. Because it was the only window, the rest of the capsule's walls were solid. This made the space feel secure, but also cut off from the outside. The round shape of the window framed the view in a way that could feel either artistic or restrictive, depending on the person. The uniformity of the capsules meant that every occupant had the same framed view and the same layout. The compact size worked well for the purpose it was designed for: short stays by people who spent most of their day outside. For a salaryman using it as a crash pad between late nights at the office and early meetings, it was functional. It provided privacy, a place to sleep, and the ability to leave personal items behind. It was more permanent than a hotel room, but required less commitment than renting a traditional apartment. The design also appealed to companies. A firm could own several capsules in the building and let employees use them when needed. Because the units were self-contained, turnover between occupants was simple. In the 1970s, this was seen as an efficient way to handle the needs of a mobile, urban workforce. Although the idea of replacing capsules was central to the design, it required ongoing investment and a willingness to update the technology inside. In the years after construction, no capsules were ever replaced. The bolts remained in place, but the cost of manufacturing and installing new units proved higher than expected. As time passed, the interiors began to age. Appliances became outdated. The materials wore down. Without replacement, the building slowly shifted from being a symbol of the future to being a time capsule of the 1970s. Stepping into a capsule at the Nakagin Tower was like stepping into a scaled-down world. The first impression was the size. 10 square meters sounds small on paper, but inside, the walls seemed to press closer. The proportions were similar to a shipping container, only adapted for living. The width left room for a narrow walkway along one side of the bed, and the length stopped just beyond the small bathroom wall. There was no wasted space, but that meant there was also no spare space. The bathroom was the tightest part of the design. It matched the dimensions of an aircraft lavatory, with the same molded plastic feel. The toilet, sink, and tiny tub were squeezed into a single unit. You could reach everything without taking a step. For a quick shower or wash, it worked, but it was not a place you lingered. The door opened directly into the bed area, so there was no sense of separation between personal space and utility space. Light entered through the single round window at the front of the capsule. It was 1.3 meters across, and its circular frame was fixed into the steel wall. The glass could not be opened, and there was no other source of outside air. The result was a sealed interior. Air conditioning and ventilation came from mechanical systems inside the capsule, not from the city outside. On bright days, the porthole admitted a focused beam of daylight. On cloudy days, the room could feel dim even at noon. At night, the window became a black circle, reflecting the inside of the capsule back at you. The fixed shape of the window gave the view an unusual quality. It was like looking out of a submarine or a spacecraft. The edges of the circle cut off the rest of the scene, so you never saw the city in full. Even a wide skyline was reduced to a framed slice. For some people, this made the view feel special, like a painting. For others, it was a reminder that they were enclosed, looking out from a confined space. The sense of separation from the outside world could become stronger over time. Inside, the walls were solid on all sides except the window. They were close enough that when you sat on the bed, your knees might almost touch the opposite wall. Standing, you could stretch out your arms and come close to touching both sides. Storage cabinets and shelves took up part of one wall, further reducing the open floor area. Movement inside the capsule was a matter of shifting from bed to desk to bathroom in a few steps. For a person used to larger living spaces, the adjustment could be difficult. There was no room to pace, no spot to step back from your own belongings. Even with minimal possessions, the space filled quickly. Clothes hung from a small rail or were folded into the built-in drawers. Anything left out sat in plain view, adding to the sense of crowding. The bed acted as a sofa during the day, but it was also the main surface for sitting, reading, and relaxing. There was no way to move far from it without leaving the capsule. The sealed construction amplified the feeling of enclosure. With no opening window, the air inside had a constant, conditioned quality. Sounds from the outside world were muted, but so were natural cues like wind or street noise. In some capsules, you might hear the hum of the air system or the faint vibration of nearby pipes. Without outside airflow, smells from cooking in other units or from the building's systems could linger. The porthole also shaped privacy in an unusual way. From certain angles outside, neighboring capsules could see directly into yours, especially at night when lights were on inside. Curtains or blinds could be pulled across the glass, but doing so cut off the only view and the main source of natural light. Occupants had to choose between seeing out and being seen. This constant awareness of the window's exposure could make it hard to relax completely. The combination of small size, fixed layout, and sealed environment created conditions that could feel confining. In a hotel room, you expect to stay for a short time. In a capsule, the space was yours to return to day after day. For some, that familiarity made the smallness easier to accept. For others, it meant the same limitations were faced again and again, with no variation in light or view. The comparison to a ship's cabin or aircraft compartment was more than visual. Like those spaces, the capsule was engineered for efficiency, not openness. Every surface had a role, every centimeter was measured for function. The design worked best when the occupant was out for most of the day, returning only to rest. If you spent long hours inside, the lack of movement and variety could wear on you. Time passed differently in a place where your surroundings stayed the same and the view never changed. Over weeks or months, this kind of environment could start to influence how you felt and behaved. The absence of open space could make you more aware of your own movements. The framed view might lead you to focus on details outside rather than the whole scene. The sealed air could make you feel apart from the city, even though you were in its center. These effects were not dramatic at first, but they could build slowly, becoming part of daily life in the capsule. From the outside, the Nakagin Capsule Tower looked like a vast mechanical hive. The capsules projected from the concrete towers in the same way on every floor. Each had the same square frame and the same large circular window. They were rotated and staggered in their placement, but the differences were structural, not personal. Walking around the building, you could not tell who lived where. There were no balconies with plants, no signs of decoration on the exterior, nothing to suggest that one capsule belonged to a particular person. The identity of each occupant was hidden behind the identical steel shells. Inside, the sameness continued. Every capsule had the same dimensions, the same arrangement of bed, desk, cabinets, and bathroom. The window was always in the same position. The walls were the same pale surfaces, the fittings the same compact appliances. Even if an occupant brought in personal items, the layout dictated where they could go. A desk stayed in its place. The bed could not be moved. The storage was fixed in size and shape. This made each capsule feel like a version of the same template. This uniformity was part of the original vision. The capsules were designed as interchangeable parts of a whole. If one was removed, another identical one could take its place. In manufacturing terms, this was efficient. In human terms, it removed the possibility of expressing much individuality through the space itself. When you opened the door to your capsule, you were not stepping into something built for you. You were stepping into a unit that was exactly like the one next door, and the one above, and the one below. Over time, this repetition could change the way people experience the building. In most apartment buildings, variation comes from the size of the units, the direction they face, or the way light falls in each room. In the Nakagin Tower, every unit was a repeat of the same design. The only difference came from what the occupants brought inside. But with so little room, even these differences were minor. A capsule could hold a few books, clothes, and personal devices, but not much else. The effect was similar to living in a dormitory or a barracks, where personal space is limited and the structure is identical for everyone. In such places, people often adapt by focusing less on the space and more on routines outside it. In Nakagin, the design encouraged this. The building provided the bare essentials, so daily life was meant to happen elsewhere, in offices, restaurants, and meeting places around the city. The capsule was a place to return to, but not to shape or make your own. There was also a psychological side to this repetition. Human beings use variety in their surroundings to orient themselves in time and space. A living room with changing sunlight through the day gives a sense of passing time. A view that shifts with the seasons connects you to a wider environment. In the capsules, the single fixed window showed only a slice of the outside world, and the interiors stayed the same, regardless of hour or weather. Days could start to blend together. Without variation, the mind had fewer cues to mark change. This kind of monotony can affect how people feel. In a space where every wall, piece of furniture, and view remains constant, the brain has less stimulation. Some may find this calming, while others find it draining. It can feel as though time moves slower, or that each day is much like the last. The physical sameness reinforces a mental sameness. When the building's corridors and stairwells are just as uniform, moving between capsules changes nothing about the visual experience. The hive-like arrangement also meant that everyone's space was part of a larger, repetitive grid. Standing outside and looking up, the pattern of capsules was striking but impersonal. It did not hint at the lives inside. For residents, this could create a feeling of being part of a collective machine rather than an individual in a home. The building's form communicated order and uniformity rather than variety or personality. The sense of depersonalization could grow stronger in a building where maintenance declined. As the finishes aged and repairs were delayed, the small ways a person might have marked their space became less noticeable against the overall wear. If the hallway to your capsule had peeling paint and the same dim light as every other hallway, your own door was just one among many. Entering and leaving the building became a repeated action without variation, reinforcing the mechanical rhythm of life there. In traditional housing, people often leave signs of themselves on the exterior: flower boxes, doormats, nameplates. In Nakagin, the design and management did not allow for such changes. The outer shell remained fixed, each capsule locked into its role as part of the whole pattern. From the street, there was no way to tell if a capsule was lived in or abandoned. This further removed any sense of personal claim to the structure. Inside, the built-in nature of the furniture meant that even personal items had to conform to the same frame. A different bed cover or a small piece of art on the wall might give a brief sense of ownership, but the space was always dominated by the fixed layout. Over time, for some occupants, this could lead to a subtle detachment from the space. It became less a personal refuge and more a functional stop between other places. The combination of identical units, fixed layouts, and repeated views created an environment where individuality had little room to grow. This was by design. It kept the building coherent and made replacement possible. But for those living there, the repetition could shift from efficiency to impersonality. In a place where nothing in the structure reflected personal choice, it was easy to feel as though you were just another part of the building's pattern. Over time, the Nakagin Capsule Tower began to show the physical strain of age. The sharp, clean lines of its 1970s construction softened under weather, wear, and neglect. In the stairwells and corridors, paint peeled in long strips from the walls. The once uniform surfaces revealed patches of bare concrete beneath. Stains spread across ceilings where water had leaked from above. Some residents, unable to wait for repairs, set up makeshift drainage systems. Plastic sheets were taped to ceilings to divert drips into buckets or down flexible tubes that snaked along the floor. These improvised fixes became part of the building's landscape, as common as the original fixtures. The capsules themselves faced the same problems. Over decades, the seals around the round windows weakened. In heavy rain, water found its way inside. Damp patches formed around frames and corners. The combination of Tokyo's summer humidity and poor ventilation encouraged mold. Small black spots appeared on walls and in the seams of bathroom units. Without regular maintenance, these spread and became difficult to remove. Asbestos was another concern. In the early 1970s, it was used widely as a fireproofing material. The panels and sprayed coatings in the Nakagin Tower contained asbestos fibers. While safe if left undisturbed, any repair work that involved drilling or cutting could release fibers into the air. Over time, this limited the types of maintenance that could be done easily. It also raised questions about the safety of living in a building where some surfaces were deteriorating. The mechanical systems aged along with the structure. By 2010, the central hot water system was shut down. This meant that showers in the capsules could no longer provide hot water. For some residents, this was the breaking point. A small living space could be tolerated if it was functional, but the loss of a basic amenity changed the balance. Bathing now required boiling water, using public bathhouses, or finding other arrangements outside the building. The lack of hot water also affected cleaning, making it harder to keep the compact bathrooms sanitary. Other systems showed their age as well. The air conditioning units installed in the 1970s were less efficient than modern equipment, and many had reached the end of their useful life. Replacements were difficult because the design of the capsules left little room to install larger or different models. Electrical wiring, originally planned for a small set of appliances, struggled to handle newer devices. Outlets were few, and extension cords became a common sight, trailing across floors or up walls. In the common areas, neglect was visible in more ways than one. The elevator cars kept working, but had bare light bulbs and worn surfaces. Carpets in the corridors were stained and frayed. Lighting was dim in some sections, leaving corners in shadow. The smell of damp concrete and old carpeting lingered. While these signs of wear were not catastrophic on their own, together they created an atmosphere of decline. Residents adapted as best they could. Some brought in portable heaters for hot water. Others added dehumidifiers to fight mold. A few kept their capsules in good condition with fresh paint and regular cleaning. But the building as a whole could not be maintained to the same standard without coordinated repairs. Ownership of the capsules was spread among many individuals, and agreement on major work was hard to reach. Without a majority decision, large-scale maintenance could not move forward. From the outside, the decline was less obvious at first glance. The pattern of capsules still gave the tower its distinctive look, but closer inspection showed fading paint and rust marks. The once glossy surfaces of the steel panels dulled over time. Dirt collected in seams and joints. The bolts holding the capsules to the towers remained in place, but their intended use, to remove and replace modules, was never put into practice. Inside, the sense of neglect was more immediate. In some hallways, residents hung temporary curtains or tarps to shield their doors from dripping water. Buckets and basins sat in corners to catch leaks. On rainy days, the sound of water dripping into containers mixed with the hum of old ventilation fans. For new visitors, the contrast between the building's futuristic reputation and its current state could be stark. Architects and design students might arrive expecting a preserved icon of the Metabolist movement, only to find a structure that bore the marks of 40 years without major renovation. The decline was not the result of one failure, but of many small ones over time. A hot water system not repaired, a leak left to worsen, a paint job delayed for another year. This slow erosion of function and appearance changed the way people experienced the space. A small, enclosed capsule could feel manageable when it was clean, dry, and fully functional. When the same capsule had a leak, lacked hot water, and carried the smell of dampness, it became harder to endure. The building still stood, but the experience of living in it had shifted far from what its designer had imagined. In the summer of 2014, one visitor booked a stay in the Nakagin Capsule Tower through Airbnb. The listing described a compact, historic unit with a distinctive round window and a location in the heart of Tokyo. The host mentioned the building's architectural importance and its role in the Metabolist movement. There was also a note about certain amenities being unavailable. That detail did not carry much weight until arrival. The day was humid, the kind of heat that clings to skin and clothing. At the entrance, a security guard sat behind a small desk. Past the lobby, a row of stainless steel mailboxes lined the wall. The key was waiting inside one of them, as arranged. The elevator was close by, its interior lit by bare bulbs. The light had a faint blue tint, making the worn gray carpet appear almost metallic. The walls were scratched and dented from decades of use. The ride was slow and quiet, apart from a low mechanical hum. The elevator doors opened onto a dim landing. The air felt heavy and warm. Short flights of stairs spiraled upward from the landing, paint peeled in wide strips from the walls. Along the ceiling, lengths of plastic tubing had been taped in place to catch leaks, leading down into buckets at the corners. The smell of damp concrete mixed with the faint odor of old carpet. Each door along the hall was identical, with no nameplates or personal touches. The capsule itself was brighter than the corridor. The cabinets had been painted white, and the built-in desk and shelves were intact. The original Sanyo refrigerator sat under the counter. A small whiteboard on the wall carried a handwritten note. The bathroom had no hot water. The shower and tub could not be used. The toilet flushed weakly. A folded towel lay on the bed, though it was unclear if it had been freshly washed. The porthole window filled one wall, framing the city outside. During the day, the window let in a controlled circle of light. At night, it became a dark lens that reflected the interior back. Without curtains drawn, it was possible for people in neighboring buildings to see directly in. Closing the blinds blocked that view, but also cut off all natural light. It was a choice between privacy and openness, neither ideal in such a small space. The air inside felt stale after only a short time. The small air conditioner gave a steady hum, but it struggled against the heat and humidity. Surfaces felt slightly damp to the touch. In such tight quarters, even the smallest change in air quality was noticeable. Later in the evening, the visitor left to find dinner in the surrounding neighborhood. Returning after midnight, the building felt different. The lobby was unstaffed, the lights dimmer. In the stairwell, shadows pooled in the corners. Some sections looked unused, with doors sealed shut or partly open to reveal empty, dusty interiors. The silence made the sound of footsteps echo. Inside the capsule, the heat had built up again despite the air conditioner. The sense of enclosure became sharper. The round window looked out onto the elevated expressway, where bright fluorescent lights shone all night. The glow spilled into the room, even with the blinds closed, casting hard lines across the bed and walls. Lying down, the visitor could hear the faint rush of traffic and the occasional drip from somewhere in the building's structure. By 2 a.m., rest was still out of reach. The air felt heavy and unmoving. The thought of showering in cold water in the morning did not help. The combination of heat, humidity, and the feeling of being on display through the window began to outweigh the novelty of staying in a famous building. Safety was also on the mind. The stairwell passed through areas that seemed abandoned, with peeling paint and loose railings. In the quiet, these spaces felt more like the shell of a building than a living one. The decision was made to leave for the night. A quick search on a phone brought up a nearby hotel, part of an international chain. A reservation was booked within minutes. Packing took almost no time. The small space meant that everything was within reach. The walk to the hotel was short, the air outside fresher than the air inside the capsule. By 2:30 a.m., the visitor was in a larger, cooler room with working plumbing and a wide window that opened. The difference was immediate. Air moved freely, light from the city came in without glare, and the hum of traffic was distant. The discomfort of the capsule receded, replaced by the simple relief of space and function. At sunrise, the visitor returned to the Nakagin Tower to take photographs in daylight before checking out. In the morning light, the building's exterior showed the contrast between its design and its condition. The capsules still projected in their futuristic pattern, but the panels were faded, with streaks of rust and grime at the seams. The round windows reflected the sky, hiding whatever was inside. From the street, it was impossible to tell which capsules were occupied and which were empty. Inside, the corridors looked the same as they had the night before, dim, damp, and marked by improvised repairs. The experience of staying there had been short, but it left a clear picture of the building's realities. A striking design worn down by time, a space that could intrigue and unsettle in equal measure, and a constant awareness of what it lacked compared to even the most basic hotel. Photographer Noritaka Minami began documenting the Nakagin Capsule Tower in 2010. Over the next decade, he stayed in the building multiple times, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. His aim was not only to record the architecture, but also to capture the lived reality inside. His photographs showed the capsules as they were, without staging or artificial lighting. He focused on details that revealed how residents adapted the space to their needs, how they worked around the limits of size and age, and how the building's decline shaped daily life. Minami gained access through residents who supported preservation efforts. They introduced him to others willing to let their capsules be photographed. In doing so, he built a visual record of variety within uniformity. From the outside, every capsule was the same. Inside, each reflected the personality, habits, and circumstances of its occupant, even within the constraints of the fixed layout. One unit belonged to a fish broker. This was not a capsule arranged for style or display, but for work and rest. The built-in cabinets had been removed to make room for a large, sturdy desk. On it were papers, ledgers, and a few personal items pushed to the edges. Metal wire shelving lined one wall, holding boxes, tools, and headphones. The bed was covered with a patterned blanket featuring teddy bears and apples, functional but not chosen to match the space. Above it, folded clothes and a helmet were stacked together. On the wall, a poster of saltwater fish hung beside a map of the Tokyo Metro. Everything in the room had a role connected to work, travel, or rest between shifts. Another photograph showed a capsule that appeared abandoned. A thick layer of dust covered the surfaces. A cutout map of Japan had been taped to the inside of the door. On a cabinet sat a white construction helmet, as if left there at the end of a shift and never reclaimed. The air looked still, the space untouched for months or years. These kinds of units raised questions about who had lived there, why they had left, and what had happened since. Some residents kept their capsules as close as possible to the original condition. These spaces retained the white cabinets, the fold-down desk, and the compact bathroom unit, cleaned and in use. A small television or laptop might be the only addition. Others made small adjustments, adding extra storage racks, replacing worn shelves, or hanging fabric to cover damaged walls. The limited floor area meant that any change was immediately visible and had to be functional. Minami's photographs also showed signs of the building's shared environment. Even inside well-kept capsules, water stains marked the corners where leaks had occurred in the past. The metal frames of the windows sometimes showed rust around the bolts. In some cases, the original window shades designed to open like a camera shutter had been removed or broken, replaced with improvised coverings. The lived experience in these capsules was shaped by what happened outside them as much as by the interiors themselves. Residents adapted to the constant noise from the nearby expressway, the glow of its lights at night, and the vibration from heavy trucks passing below. They made choices about privacy, deciding whether to leave blinds open for light or closed to block the view from neighboring buildings. For some, the capsule was only one part of their daily life in Tokyo. It was a place to sleep between long workdays, a storage space for clothes and personal items, or a quiet corner to retreat to after spending most of the day in public. For others, especially those without other housing, it was their only home. In those cases, the capsule had to serve as a bedroom, living room, and study all in one. The contrast between occupied and abandoned units added to the building's atmosphere. Walking down a corridor, one door might open to a clean, functional space with a resident inside. Another might conceal a dusty, unused capsule with signs of past occupation still in place. The mix of active and empty spaces created a sense of uncertainty about how many people actually lived in the tower at any given time. Minami's project documented this blend of presence and absence. His photographs showed how the building's original vision of interchangeable, replaceable living units had shifted into a patchwork of personal improvisation and slow decay. In the fish broker's capsule, work dictated the arrangement, with little concern for the original fittings. In the abandoned unit, time had frozen, leaving only hints of a former occupant's routines. In better-maintained capsules, care and adaptation kept the space functional despite the lack of building-wide repairs. Through his lens, the building became a record of individual lives within a rigid framework. The design did not allow for structural personalization, but the contents of each capsule told its own story. Even in a place built on the idea of sameness, the residents had found ways to leave traces of themselves, whether in the choice of blanket on a bed, the arrangement of work tools, or the maps and posters pinned to the walls. On the Baltic Sea island of Rügen in Germany, the Prora complex stretches for almost 3 miles along the shore. Built in the 1930s under the Nazi regime, it was meant to be a seaside resort for workers, part of a program designed to keep citizens loyal to the state. The war interrupted construction, and the resort was never used as intended. Its scale is hard to take in from the ground. The same low-rise block, repeated over and over, runs in a straight line with little variation in its facade. Standing in the middle of it, you can look in either direction and see the same sequence of windows disappearing into the distance. The repetition is overwhelming. It removes any sense of beginning or end. For many visitors, the size and sameness create a feeling of disconnection, as though the building is indifferent to the people near it. Inside, the long corridors and identical rooms offer no sense of place. You could walk for minutes and still feel as if you have not moved at all. Across the world in San Jose, California, the Winchester Mystery House is unsettling for very different reasons. Built over decades by Sarah Winchester, the widow of a firearms magnate, it expanded without a clear plan. Rooms were added at odd angles, hallways doubled back on themselves. Stairs led to ceilings, and doors opened into empty drops. Windows looked out into other rooms instead of the outside. The result was a house that seemed to undermine the logic of its own structure. Walking through it can leave you disoriented. Your sense of direction falters because you cannot build a mental map. Spaces do not connect in the ways you expect. Light falls strangely through windows and interior walls. For some visitors, this playful illogic is fascinating, but for others, it is unnerving. The building creates constant spatial dissonance, keeping you slightly on edge because you cannot predict what will come next. In Taiwan, the Sanzhi UFO houses were another experiment in futuristic living that ended in abandonment. Built in the late 1970s as a holiday resort, they were composed of pod-shaped units, each a rounded, 2-level structure with wide windows and bright colors. From a distance, they looked like clusters of landed spacecraft. The project was plagued by financial trouble and accidents during construction. Work stopped, and the site was left to decay. Over the years, weather and vandalism stripped away the bright finish. Glass broke, interiors rotted, and weeds pushed through the floors. Walking among them before they were demolished in 2010, visitors reported a strong sense of isolation. The pods stood silent and empty, their curved forms giving the impression of a once active colony now deserted. The lack of human presence, combined with the alien shapes, made the place feel disconnected from the world around it. It was not just the decay that created unease, but the sense of a vision for the future that had failed completely. The Pruitt Igoe housing project in St. Louis, Missouri, was built in the 1950s to provide modern, affordable apartments for low-income residents. It consisted of 33 11-story buildings arranged in a grid. The design followed ideas of the time: high-rise blocks surrounded by open space, with shared corridors and elevators. Within a few years, problems emerged. Maintenance was poor, crime increased, and the open areas between buildings were rarely used as intended. The long corridors became unsafe, and the elevators often failed. Inside the apartments, the uniform design left little room for personal expression. The combination of physical neglect and social problems created an environment where residents felt cut off from each other and from the city. By the early 1970s, the project was considered a failure, and demolition began in 1972, less than 20 years after it opened. The fall of Pruitt Igoe became a symbol of the limits of architectural solutions when social and economic realities are ignored. All four of these places, though different in purpose and design, show how the built environment can create feelings of unease. In Prora, it is the endless repetition and inhuman scale. In the Winchester Mystery House, it is the loss of logical order. In the Sanzhi UFO houses, it is abandonment and the collapse of a dream. In Pruitt Igoe, it is the erosion of community through uniform, impersonal design and neglect. Each has a clear physical presence that shapes the way people move, think, and feel inside it. The discomfort does not always come from obvious danger or poor condition. Sometimes it comes from the way a space works against the brain's need for variety, coherence, and connection. The walls do not have to close in physically for a place to feel confining. The arrangement of space itself can narrow the mind's sense of freedom. By the early 2000s, the Nakagin Capsule Tower had become the subject of a debate between those who wanted to save it and those who believed it should come down. Supporters of preservation pointed to its place in architectural history. It was one of the last standing examples of the Metabolist movement, a rare building that had been designed from the start to adapt over time. For them, it represented not just a moment in Japanese design, but also a bold experiment in how cities could grow. Architects, historians, and design enthusiasts saw value in keeping it as a physical record of a unique idea, even if it no longer functioned as intended. The argument against preservation was more practical. Many of the capsules were in poor condition, with water leaks, mold, and outdated systems. The asbestos used in construction made repairs expensive and complicated. The original plan for replacing capsules had never been carried out, and the cost of building new ones was high. In addition, the site sat in Ginza, one of Tokyo's most valuable districts. Developers argued that a modern building could use the land more efficiently, offering more space and higher returns. For the owners of individual capsules, the idea of selling and moving on was appealing, especially for those who no longer used their units. Reaching agreement was difficult because the building was owned in pieces. Each capsule was its own property, and any major decision required the consent of a large majority of owners. Over the years, votes to demolish were held more than once. The first successful vote came in 2007, but plans stalled as the economy slowed and potential redevelopment deals fell through. In the meantime, the building's condition continued to worsen. Preservation groups tried to find another way forward. One proposal was to replace the capsules in stages, updating the interiors and systems while keeping the original concrete towers. This would have honored the building's modular design and given it a new lease on life. Fundraising campaigns were launched, including appeals to international supporters. While these efforts gained attention, they did not gather enough money or commitments to match the cost of the work. When demolition was finally approved in the 2020s, some saw it as the loss of an irreplaceable piece of design history. Others saw it as a necessary end to a building that had outlived its use. Before the dismantling began, a project was launched to create a complete digital archive. The building was scanned using laser measurements and photographed in detail. This created a record accurate enough to reproduce the structure in virtual form, preserving the way it looked both inside and out. Several capsules were set aside for physical preservation. Museums and private collectors acquired them, with plans to restore and display them. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art received one capsule. Others were kept in Japan, with some slated to be placed along the coast in Kanagawa Prefecture. These preserved units serve as tangible reminders of the tower's design and the way it was lived in. They also allow people to experience the space without the challenges of the original building's declining condition. The dismantling process reflected the building's design. Each capsule could be unbolted from the core and lowered by crane. In this way, the tower came apart much as it had been assembled. For those who believed in the Metabolist vision, this was a final demonstration of the idea in action, even if it happened for reasons far from the original intent. The Nakagin Capsule Tower leaves behind a complex legacy. For some, it will always be a symbol of innovation, a physical proof that architecture could embrace change and adaptability. For others, it is a cautionary tale about the gap between vision and long-term reality. Its compact, efficient units worked well for a specific type of resident in a specific time, but they proved less flexible when needs changed. The idea of replacement modules was sound in theory, but failed in practice when economic and social factors made it impractical. Its story also illustrates the psychological weight buildings can carry. To admirers, living in a capsule was a connection to a historic experiment, a statement of design values. To others, the same space was cramped, isolating, and hard to endure. The building could inspire fascination or discomfort, depending on who you were and what you expected from your surroundings. This duality, the same structure being utopia for one person and a nightmare for another, shows how personal the experience of architecture can be. The broader lesson is that architecture is never only about form or function. It is about the relationship between a structure and the people who inhabit it over time. A design that seems perfect on paper can become difficult in practice when conditions shift. A space that meets one generation's needs may frustrate the next. The Nakagin Capsule Tower was shaped by the optimism of its era, but its decline was shaped by the realities of maintenance, ownership, and changing lifestyles. In both stages, it influenced how people felt, worked, and lived, making it as much a psychological space as a physical one.